Thank you for giving that disclaimer. I hate it, but there it is. Okay. The year is 1984. Okay, it sounds ominous, doesn't it? But the year is 1984, and my family and I are sitting around the dinner table discussing different topics. Okay, so here's my family back then. Those are my parents, in my right, thinking they were cool looking. In the other photograph, the guy with the winning hairstyle is my brother. My two sisters are at the end, and the brooding, boyish-looking one in the middle is me. Well, somehow the topic at the table had turned to this: should we eat animals? Well, we discussed it, and we decided that since humans have been eating animals forever, that eating animals is a natural and right thing to do. So we patted ourselves on our back for a very rational and informed decision-making, and we kept on eating animals. And the truth is, we really didn't know anything about the topic except what we discussed at the table. We didn't know anything about the animals raised for food, and we didn't want to know anything about the animals raised for food. We were living in such lovely, lovely ignorant bliss. Well, 3 years, shaved mustaches, and plucked eyebrows later, we are back at the dinner table, and my mother announces that she's no longer serving meat in the house, and my family agrees on the spot. What do you think happened in just 3 years that caused such a turnaround in our view? Well, this happened. We adopted a little stray kitten, named her Pebbles, and she became the love of our lives. And this happened. As a companion for Pebbles, we adopted Louie, who also became the love of our lives. Now, you have to know a little something about my family to understand why this was so remarkable, especially for my father. He grew up in a small rural village in Pakistan where animals are considered dirty creatures meant to be kept separate from humans. As a teenager, my brother shot BB guns at the neighborhood cats. Fortunately, he was a bad shot. And when my sisters and I were younger, we were taught by our friends and actually believed that all black cats are evil. All of that changed when Louie and Pebbles entered our lives. My previously animal-loathing father became an absolute softie, and both of my parents quickly came to prefer the company of our cats over the company of their 3 teenage daughters and their 23-year-old son who was still living at home with no plans for leaving. He stayed there for a lot longer, too. So seeing our cats as individuals with their own personalities helped us to see all animals as individuals in their own right. Through our cats, we came to see all animals, including those raised for food, not as what, but as who. So we developed a new relationship with animals, a relationship that was certainly better for the animals. But here's the best part. This relationship was also much better for us. Now, more than 25 years of living off a vegan lifestyle, my family is much, much healthier. All 4 of my father's brothers died from heart disease and stroke in their 50s and 60s. My father's 80 years old, and he's still going strong. My mother is 75 years old, and she has the looks and energies of someone in her 50s. And my sister's crushing migraines stopped after she cut out dairy. So seeing the benefits that my family experienced caused me to ask a larger question. Do we as a society benefit from treating animals with basic kindness and respect? So in the medical field, there's this tendency, and actually I would say in the larger field, the world in general, and you guys know this when you go out there, there's sort of a tendency to think that we are in some sort of competition with animals, that we can either use our time, our resources, and our energy to protect animals from harm or humans. In other words, we've been led to believe that we have to make a choice. It's us or the animals. But over the course of my career in medicine and public health, I found that we are not in competition with animals. It's quite the opposite. Our fates are shared with animals. In fact, many of our most urgent public health threats are connected with the way we treat animals. And nowhere is this more apparent than in our eating habits. Now, you've all heard the statistics. We have, for every human on the planet now, there are about more than 5 animals raised and killed for food at any given time. 5 animals for each human. And we thought human overpopulation was a problem. So this is a massive, massive industry. And as you know, the days of family farms are long gone. And in their place, we have factory farms. Chickens, pigs, and turkeys now live here. Now, these animals are so crowded by the thousands and hundreds of thousands into these sheds that fans have to circulate the air to literally keep these animals from suffocating. These animals are constantly breathing in aerosolized fecal matter, ammonia from their urine, and pathogens that are circulating in the air. Now, these are pictures that I took. I recently visited several farms in Oklahoma in the US. And I have to tell you, the pictures you might see and even the videos don't even come close to conveying what these places are like. All of your senses are affronted when you go near one of these places. The first thing that hit me was the deafening roar of thousands of birds trapped into one building. The second thing that hit me was the stench. And my God, I have to tell you, that stench was the worst thing I have ever smelled. And I'm a doctor. I'm used to bad smells. But to give you an idea of what this smell was like, take a cat's litter box and don't clean it for a month. Then add to it the litter from 10 other cats whose litter you haven't cleaned for a month. Then add to that 5 rotting eggs. Then add a decomposing body. Then stick your head inside this very large litter box, and you'll have an idea of what these places smell like. I was gagging, and thought I was going to vomit. The stench was so bad. And these are sad, sad animals. They live lives of quiet suffering and misery that's hidden away from our view. I've seen chickens with open sores rubbing against the cage wires. The so-called free-range chickens, they're not much better. I saw pigs that have gone mad because they're living their entire lives in crates barely larger than the size of their own bodies. They can't even turn around. And by causing animals to suffer, we cause ourselves to suffer. When you eat meat, eggs, and dairy, you are eating something that is teeming with bacteria, like E. coli and Salmonella. And the very drugs we rely on to combat these bacteria are being pumped into these animals. In the 1970s, it was discovered that by feeding animals low and continuous doses of antibiotics, they were able to keep these animals growing and surviving long enough to make a profit. And this has created superbugs on the farm, bacteria that our antibiotics can no longer fight. Several years ago, University of Minnesota did a very large study in which they sampled different animal products at many different grocery stores. And what they found was harmful bacteria in 2/3 of the beef and the pork, and in 97% of the chicken sold in the grocery store. Chicken is the worst culprit. And what's more, most of the bacteria was resistant to at least one antibiotic. Now, these bacteria live in the intestinal tracts of animals, and they are shed in their feces. So think about this. When your meat's contaminated with E. coli or Salmonella, it's also contaminated with feces. Multiple studies have found antibiotic-resistant bacteria thriving in animal products long after they're nicely packaged and sold in the grocery stores. Now, you know all the care you take in buying and preparing your food? Well, your food was contaminated long before you brought it home. Factory farms are miserable places. And because these animals are so stressed and distressed, their immune systems are down. And that makes factory farms perfect breeding grounds for infectious diseases. And then, at the end of these sad lives, when animals are slaughtered, they are so terrified that they frequently soil themselves and they cross-contaminate other carcasses down the slaughter line. In the US alone, we slaughter 1 million animals an hour. 1 million an hour. Do you honestly think that inspection officers quickly glancing at these carcasses as they whiz by on the slaughter line is going to protect you? We need to protect ourselves. And we can protect ourselves if we consider the plight of animals. If, however, we continue to ignore their treatment, we're going to have an even bigger problem on our hands. Our greatest danger is not going to be bacteria, but a new viruses that can cause pandemics. And of all the scary viruses out there right now, the one that really keeps public health folks up at night is the good old influenza A virus. The worst pandemic in history occurred just as World War I was winding down. The 1918 influenza A virus killed more people in 25 weeks than AIDS has killed in 25 years. So for good reason, we public health folks call it the mother of all pandemics. Now, the virus was able to take hold and spread quickly among the soldiers who were miserable and crowded in the muddy trenches. Like factory farms, the trenches became breeding grounds for infectious diseases. Now, since the war, the influenza virus had remained quite stable for a number of years. But recently, it's been rapidly mutating. Why? Because of factory farms. Influenza A viruses originate from wild aquatic birds, so wild ducks and geese. But we rarely become sick from direct contact with these animals. Something has to happen to the virus to allow it to cause harm to us. And this is where animal farms come in. Despite all attempts to keep the virus out, an influenza virus can easily enter a chicken or a turkey factory farm. And once it does, it can transform quickly from a very mild virus into a very deadly one. And what's more, pigs are virus mixing vessels. Pigs can carry other influenza viruses from other pigs, from humans, and from birds. So if the situation is right, a new virus can emerge that can spread easily among people. Now, I know we keep hearing about bird flus and swine flus in the media. Here in the UK and across Europe just this past year, there was a bird flu epidemic that swept across the farms, H5N8. So, the reaction is we kill all the animals. We think we've contained it, the epidemic. We breathe a sigh of relief. Oh, yes. And then we just continue on with the same practice as normal. Well, what you may not be aware of is we have been incredibly lucky so far. If you were to catch one of the most common bird flus circulating among humans, you would have only a 40% chance of surviving. That's worse than the average death rate from Ebola. 40% chance of surviving. Now that is a deadly virus. Fortunately, bird flu has not been very contagious among humans. Now in 2009, a swine flu emerged that is contagious among humans, but has not been very deadly so far. Because of the crowded conditions, in a factory farm, a bird or swine flu can spread from animal to animal like wildfire. Like the trenches, factory farms are incubators for the virus, except now instead of having sick soldiers by the thousands unable to escape the virus, we have sick animals by the billions. You see, the poor animals on these farms are like nightclubs for viruses. In these animals, different viruses can get together, swap greetings, and exchange genetic material. And each time a virus passes into another animal, it can mutate into an even deadlier form. Despite how deadly that 1918 virus was, it still killed less than 5% of people who were infected. So what do you think will happen if a bird flu that kills 60% of people were to combine with a swine flu that spread fast? Because of our appetite for animal products, I truly believe this. It is just a matter of time before a new virus emerges that has the right combination to be both deadly and contagious. And this time, we're going to find ourselves face to face with the mother-in-law of all pandemics. Okay, so I told you the bad news, right? As long as we continue to ignore the plight of animals, we remain trapped in this never-ending cycle where the suffering we cause animals comes back and causes our own suffering. But of course, there's good news. We can actually stop this. We don't need complicated strategies, and we don't have to wait for our government or corporations to do the right thing. We each have the power in our own hands to make a large impact. And it all comes down to one thing. Just choose one plate of food over another. That is it. It is so simple. One plate of food over another. by simply choosing that plate of delicious vegan and healthy food, and instead of that nasty plate of fecal and bacterial-ridden meat, eggs, and dairy, you know I picked the grossest picture possible. You will single-handedly help prevent a pandemic, and you will protect yourself from a stroke, and you will help protect our planet, and you will save thousands of animals from a lifetime of suffering and an absolutely horrendous death. So think about this. How often in life are we given the opportunity to make such a tremendous impact with so little effort? So we have a new choice before us. We can remain trapped and continue in that backward cycle, or we can stop and change course in the forward direction, and we can save animals and save ourselves. So imagine for a moment if we saw the destinies of humans and animals as shared. Imagine if we saw all animals, and that includes the lowliest and the most abused animals, the chickens, the pigs, the cows, the turkeys. Imagine if we saw all animals, not as what, but as who. And imagine how much brighter the future could be for all of us if we finally recognized it. We are all humans and animals in it together. Thank you very much.